Freddie Gray had given rise to a serious erosion of public trust. In order to address this issue, I have been asked by city officials and community leaders to augment our approach to the situation with a court enforcement model. I've spent the last few days with my team considering which of the Justice Department's tools for police reform best meets the current needs of the Baltimore Police Department and the broader Baltimore community. Today, the Department of Justice is opening an investigation into whether the Baltimore Police Department has engaged in a pattern or practice of violations of the Constitution or federal law. This investigation will begin immediately and will focus on allegations that Baltimore Police Department officers use excessive force, including deadly force, conduct unlawful searches, seizures, and arrests, and engage in discriminatory policing. The COPS Office will continue to work with the Baltimore Police Department, and the collaborative reform process will now convert to the provision of technical assistance to the Baltimore Police Department. Now, some may ask how this differs from our current work with Baltimore Police Department. And the answer is, rather than examining whether the police department violated good policies, we will now examine whether they violated the Constitution and the community's civil rights. This approach has been welcomed by the Baltimore City Fraternal Order of Police, and I want to thank them for their support and their partnership as we move forward. Now, in the coming days, Civil Rights Division attorneys and investigators conducting the investigation and the police experts who will assist them will be engaging with community members and with law enforcement. We will examine policies, practices, and available data. And at the conclusion of our investigation, we will issue a report of our findings. If unconstitutional policies or practices are found, we will seek a court-enforceable agreement to address those issues. We will also continue to move forward to improve policing in Baltimore, even as the pattern or practice investigation is underway. Our goal is to work with the community, public officials, and law enforcement alike to create a stronger, better Baltimore. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has conducted dozens of these pattern or practice investigations to date, and we have seen from our work in jurisdictions across the country that communities that have gone through this process are experiencing improved policing practices and increased trust between the police and the community. In fact, I encourage other cities to study our past recommendations and see whether they can be applied in their own communities. Ultimately, this process is meant to ensure that officers are being provided with the tools that they need, including training, policy guidance, and equipment, to be more effective, to partner with civilians, and to strengthen public safety. Now, for many people across the country, the tragic death of Mr. Freddie Gray and the unfortunate violence that did occur has come to personify the city, as if that alone is Baltimore. But earlier this week, I visited with members of the community who took to the streets in the days following the unrest to pick up trash, to clear away debris, and they are Baltimore. I visited with elected officials who were determined to help the neighborhoods that they love come back stronger and more united, and they are Baltimore. I visited youth leaders who believe that there is a brighter day ahead, and they are Baltimore too. And I also visited with law enforcement officers who had worked up to 16 days without a break. And they were focused not on themselves or even their own safety, but on protecting the people who live in their community. They too are Baltimore. Now, none of us have any illusions that reform is easy. The challenges that we face and that Baltimore faces now did not arise in a day, and change will not come overnight. It will take time and sustained effort. But the people that I met in Baltimore, from the protesters to the public officials to the officers, including one who had been injured amidst the violence, all were saying to me ultimately the same thing. I love my city, and I want to make it better. And that is why I'm optimistic about this process. And that's why I am actually hopeful about the days and weeks to come. And that is why I am confident that as a result of this investigation and the hard work that is still ahead, and make no mistake about it, it is hard work, all members of the Baltimore community, residents and law enforcement alike, will be able to create a stronger, a safer, and a more united city together. Thank you for your time and your attention, and this time I'd like to open it up for a few questions.
apart from the request itself that came from the city, what have you seen or heard from residents of Baltimore that would lead you to believe that the ongoing Justice Department review would in fact need to be augmented? Is the progress not sufficient? Are the problems deeper than perhaps you had initially understood? Can you talk a little bit about why the Justice Department believes that the cops review itself doesn't work or is not sufficient for this?
Certainly, and let me say at the outset that we believe very strongly in the collaborative reform process, and it has helped numerous communities and police departments across the country. But for collaborative reform to ultimately be effective, we really need to have that three-part base of support: police engagement, elected official engagement, and community engagement, and the ability to have faith in the process. Obviously, we've all seen events change in Baltimore and become much more intense over a very, very short period of time. And it was clear to a number of people looking at this situation that the community's rather frayed trust, to use an understatement, was even worse and has in effect been severed in terms of the relationship with the police department. So we felt that that was one factor in viewing whether or not we would literally be able to use collaborative reform to actually make the changes that we need. Also, as we looked more at the issues facing the police department itself in terms of the needs that they have and in terms of the issues the residents were raising, they essentially were much more serious and they were more intense than when we began the collaborative review process. And so we felt that the best thing to do was to conduct an investigation to see whether or not these issues arose to the level of federal civil rights violations, and if so, have the best model in which to address them, which in our view is a court-enforceable agreement.
Senator Mikulski yesterday made reference to a fractured trust between police and communities around the country, not only in Baltimore. And I wonder, from your standpoint, how serious that fracture is nationally.
Well, you know, we've had a number of situations that have highlighted this fracture in various communities, in different parts of the country, cities of all sizes, issues ranging from people being harmed or unfortunate deaths in custody. So I think we see it when it occurs. But I think that the issue really goes beyond just the interaction between the police and the community, because we're talking about generations, not only of mistrust, but generations of communities that feel very separated from government overall. And so you're talking about situations where there's a flashpoint occurrence that coalesces years of frustration and anger. And that's what I think you saw in Baltimore when there was that unfortunate night of violence. And I think you see it in other cities around the country as well. You can't look at a city and predict what's going to happen. You can't look at a city and analyze it, and certainly we're not looking to do that. What we hope, though, is that our work, both through collaborative reform and past investigations, other cities can look at their own environments and